Welcome to the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to what's actually working and what isn't in today's workplace. In today's episode, the bare minimum economy, when employees stop trying and nobody notices, host Andreas Wieman and Tim Keefe, CEO of TransformCX and SDSS Global, break down an HR executive article by Jen Coletta titled, "Is Ghostworking About to Reemerge Mid-Layoffs?" published April 30th, 2026. The piece profiles a London employee named Layla Kazam, who ran an experiment. What's the bare minimum I can do and still keep my job? The answer? Almost nothing. Status updates before check-ins, pleasant small talk, zero actual output. And her manager never noticed. Andreas and Tim connect Layla's experiment to the forces making ghost working not just possible, but rational. Gallup's 2026 State of the Global Workplace report shows 20% engagement globally, manager engagement down to 22%, and managers now carrying double the span of control with fewer tools and less support. You'll hear why companies are laying off staff to fund AI investments that cost more than the people they replace, why one-sided loyalty expectations are driving disengagement, and what happens when organizations measure badge swipes instead of business outcomes. The conversation also tackles the ROI question. Nobody's asking about AI implementations, why empathetic leadership is treated as a luxury instead of a baseline, and why the organizations that fix engagement will save more money than any technology ever could. Whether you're a manager with a span of control that's doubled in the past year, an executive wondering why productivity isn't matching headcount cuts, or a leader trying to figure out why your best people keep leaving, this episode offers a data-grounded conversation about what's actually broken and what it takes to fix it. Let's get into it.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. The Stop Doing Stuff podcast, because there isn't another one out there, and we know there's a lot of stupid stuff going on there. So Tim, what are we talking about today in your thoughts on this article on, again, kind of seeing some funky stuff going on out there?
Yeah, so first off, great introduction. The article we want to talk about this week's another HR executive article. The author is Jen Coletta. Jen is one of the executive editors there, our managing editors. I forget if I got her title wrong. But she wrote an interesting article. Title is Ghostworking About to Reemerge Mid-Layoffs? And this was published April 30th, Thursday, the past week. And I think it's not a long article, but it's really interesting because the article points to an individual who essentially kind of took it on as a hack to say, what's the bare minimum I could get away with and not get terminated? And they did this because they don't care. And why don't they care? Well, it's this lack of engagement that you and I talk about a lot and reinforced by the Gallup report on global employee engagement that was released in March, late March, early April. Yeah. And if you haven't viewed that report, and I really recommend this for anybody who in any organization should be aware of this. The numbers are terrible. You know, it's the average is 20% of employees are engaged in the work they do globally. And people go, oh my God, that must be in all these terrible parts of the world. But here in the US, the employees are highly engaged. And, look at it, we talk about family. And I said, I don't know about that, right? I think again, in any organization, you want employees to trust. Right? There's this big thing about I've hired you. We want you to believe in our mission. We want to treat you like family. How many times have we heard this? In fact, Salesforce was famous for they used the term ohana, which is the Hawaiian term for family, all the time. And then boom, they laid off, I think it was almost 37% of their staff. Now, that was combined with the pandemic, that was combined with return to office and a big conversation about how AI is replacing a lot of these employees. We don't know, right? We see the headlines, we see the articles, we see the announcements about big layoffs. But behind the scenes, you also hear that there's what they call AI washing going on, which is we make these announcements because the market is looking for an announcement about AI and AI effectiveness or efficiencies. But how does that really translate? And can AI actually replace all these people? And I think what we're seeing is the answer is not well documented. And you and I talk a lot about the...
Well, I would say, Tim, you have a lot of the tech heavyweights are reporting earnings this week, right, in the US, like Google, Apple, Microsoft. I think all of them in the past 2 weeks that I've reported, and they've like been very transparent about how successful AI has been and how much it's helped organizations. I'm being super facetious right now. You're 100% right. Like I was going to make this comment because I think you said it perfectly. Ohana, like Salesforce's
Yeah.
terms, it's just words. It's just words. I care more about actions and cause and effect and looking at, okay, well, you're telling me this, does it actually happen? Did you follow through with it? That's what I like to measure, true culture and substance on.
Yeah.
And I think now we're in an unprecedented time of that posturing or talk occurring because it's easy to talk and it's easy to leverage social media. And
Right.
then I think the mind frame is, well, we can have this message, we can convey this message from a marketing perspective, like I won't name the actual name, but the super place to work. I've seen so many, awards of super places to work. And I go look at their financials and their turnover and their, employee reviews. They're
Pretty
they're
terrible.
they're terrible,
Yeah.
So again, it's one thing where you're talking, it's not being backed up by objectively measured outputs or actions,
Well,
measurable actions.
and like as you and I talk over and over and over again, what are we measuring? Are we measuring attendance in the office, which is really what we see over and over again, versus really what are the business outcomes and drivers that we need our staff to do and why? And I think the companies want it both ways, right? They want to be able to terminate people on at will, right? We've all been there, right? The at will letter that says, I've hired you, but I can terminate you at any time for any reason or no reason and with no notice, right? I have no requirement to give you any notice. However, on the flip side, I expect that you're going to give me a minimum of 2 weeks notice if you leave, blah, 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 blah. So it's very one-sided. The other thing too is these companies that demand or are requesting quote unquote loyalty, the loyalty only works one way, right? They don't seem to have any sense of, oh, okay, you've been here 15 years, you've gotten us where we are. What am I doing to, in many cases, actually, those high tenure employees get paid more. So guess who we lay off first? The people who've actually been engaged and the people who gotten their heart into it, and now we leave them on the street. And
Well,
that
then,
scares everybody in the organization is now
no,
running
you're right.
terrified.
You're right.
So,
And they're having that feeling. They're all people, right? So again, we talk about the Gallup report and they track everything like sadness and
yep,
get off the top of the head some of the other ones like there's specific words that they use like thriving, etc. They're all terrible. They're all people and they're all individual. But that same scenario that you just said, that you just talked about, where there's no reciprocation of, that family value or, that trust, it's kind of one way. Think about how they don't measure, like they're even internally, they're measuring terribly. If you think of most annual reviews, right, or quarterly reviews, it's like a 360 evaluation, right? So it's completely subjective. There's really no objective measurements in there. And even when there is a smidgen of objectivity that's in there, usually the goal that it's being held to is completely unattainable, right? And then you have the default mechanism, which whatever your manager is, that they're just going to write it up. Oh, they have a deadline and they got all of their other work done here at the end of the quarter or the end of the year is coming up. So I got to do all of these, direct report reviews. Oh, I'm sure they're going to be accurately represented for a quarter's worth of interactions and engagements and results, let alone a year's worth, right? And then you're like, all right, well, how are people supposed to take this feedback and implement it for the next year to try to achieve the goals that are, again, kind of squishy? My point in all of this now, I'm tripping up a bit, it's just very squishy. There is no preciseness out there, and there's no individualism that's applied, no like logic. It's just very, here's a goal. Everybody has to hit this goal. Well, I work nights. I can't hit that. That doesn't matter. Everybody hits this goal.
well,
Okay.
and even then, it's kind of like, here in Northern California and San Francisco with a lot of the tech firms, there's this buzz around 996. The expectation is you work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. Forget about the
That's
labor
rookie.
laws and all
That's
the rest of
rookie
this stuff.
numbers.
Well, but we see a
Well,
lot of these.
sorry, I'm saying for myself, like when you're trying to relax and stuff, and I'm like pinging you about stuff that I'm working on. I'm kidding, I'm being facetious.
Well, again, it goes back to It's a one-sided expectation. I expect
Yep.
you to give up your personal life. Oh, we're no longer talking about work-life balance because we've got to put in, 7 days a week or 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, so we can make our numbers. Oh, by the way, the only people who are going to really make any big money on, these startups or pre-funding types of companies are going to be a handful of founders. Everybody else is going to get left in the dark. Watch this happen many, many times. This is not a new
Yep.
model. But the thing that I thought was really interesting, go back to the specifics of the article, was they named the individual, and it was very interesting. Layla Kazam, she's a London employee, and she talks about like she conducted an experiment to see how little she had to do to make the bare minimum. And fundamentally, she did nothing except, right before any scheduled interactions with her supervisor on status. And the boss seemed to be, as long as there was some status, even if it wasn't accurate or was just kind of made up, was good enough.
Yep.
And you're like, so that's the checkbox stuff that you and I talk about a lot, which is like, oh, as a supervisor, I'm required to give 30 minutes of coaching to all the people that are in my span of control.
Right.
Who's actually going to follow up on that? So I'll just say I did it. And, unless somebody comes back and actually talks to your individual staff, which who's going to do that, right? Like if you're not doing it, who else is doing it?
Well, no,
So,
you're spot on though. But I want to add one thing right here is again going back to the Gallup report. If you look at manager engagement globally, doesn't matter what country or region, it's terrible. It is probably the biggest point that I'm taking away from it. There's a whole bunch of other points, but it's the biggest kind of common connector. Like if you address this, it'll address some of the
yep,
subroutines, some of the sub problems. And so exactly what you're saying, Tim, is now you're having these layoffs, right? So companies can, quote unquote, invest in their AI strategy. I laugh when I say that. So full of crap. But they have higher SPS ratios for managers. So now you have Layla, right? And she's probably reporting to a manager that has like double the amount of managers they had
uh,
previously. And now they're box checking. They're like, oh, Layla, yeah, she was real cool. She's nice. She was pleasant to me. She brought me coffee when we had our quick touch base. And that's the impression. It's a human. The manager is still a human. You think, they're executive. Doesn't matter. We're all humans, right? For the most part. I'm a little bit like a robot. My wife reminds me of, but mostly we're all humans. So all of that affects our decision-making criteria and framework. And so if that's the cognitive recall I have is Layla came in, she was really pleasant, and I don't have a good measurement system objectively for productivity, then guess what? Layla's getting a pass. We're going to pay for her, subsidized health insurance again, or whatever the case may be. That's kind of the
yep,
key in the whole quiet quitting thing.
yep.
And it's getting compounded now because of the manager disengagement that has gone up year over year over year.
Well, exactly. So managers have bigger spans of control. They have less tools of their own to effectively engage with their employees. Their employees aren't interested in engaging because they're really doing other stuff, to your point. So at the end of the day, I think it's a train wreck scenario. And I think there are a
Yep.
lot of senior level executives who are going, and this is a temporary problem because we're going to replace all these people with AI. And then I'm going to finish up with my other AI comment because I think it's so relevant. And as you and I have talked about both publicly and privately, where's the ROI? And just recently, there was an article, I can't, forget which one of the many AI companies, I think it might have been Anthropic. One of the VPs came out and said, yeah, unfortunately, the true story is that AI, the technology costs are higher than the cost of the people that they're replacing. What? Wait a minute. And even then, I would argue, are they truly baking in the full costs, supporting a particular role, right? And I think it's hard to do it, right? Because you have some really huge costs like the data
Yeah.
center cost, the energy cost, the power consumption, the cooling,
Well,
et cetera.
think
But
of it exactly what you just said right now about the consumption. So you have, I'm going to genericize this a bit. You have AI companies going on and selling AI services, right? Anthropic, and you have companies who are like, oh, that sounds really, really good. Let's do that. All of our employees now, you're mandated to use Anthropic, use the AI, right? And so now no one's really training them on it. It's so new. No one knows how to do it. It's still kind of frontier territory. So people are curious and they're trying to use it and it's bumping consumption up, which then, the cause and effect of that is higher energy costs, right, for the AI suppliers. And they're like, well, what was the big issue when people were going in, like talking and interacting with the front end of the inference, the AI, like being polite, saying please, and that using token consumption, and it's not adequately priced high enough to offset the power consumption of the unnecessary words that are being used in the prompt, something like that. But like that's one thing that's occurring. There's other things I'm probably not even contemplating, but it's all like this very symbiotic effect of people just trying to like FOMO. Let me just get AI because we can have AI now. We can claim, we're an AI organization. You know how my thing is like with these call center companies acting like they're AI. Man, I would love to get them on a podcast, some AI chief, whatever they made up title they want to have, and have a conducive conversation that the
Well,
public can hear on that.
I don't think they I don't think they'll show up, but
Nah, they won't.
I wouldn't disagree. But in any case, again, great article by Jen, and and again, I think this is not a problem that's going away. In fact, what's scary about this article is that, especially in social media, where people are almost challenging people to how far
Yeah.
can you go? Where's the edge? And not in a good way, right? People aren't challenging each other to be more engaged at work. They're challenging each other. What's the bare minimum? And
Yeah, but
how far can I challenge the system before it breaks?
well,
And
I think that's good
terrible.
though. Like Tim, I honestly think we're at that point though, from a societal perspective, where maybe that's what's needed for people to open up their eyes. Like I think the level of complacency has reached pretty high plateaus. And I think
Yep.
maybe this is what it takes for people to say, maybe, with that line, maybe we're the bad guys, of saying, hey, we need to start reevaluating all of the options we have out there. Because I will tell you, as you and I are working on, and we're getting ready to announce, we're going to be a little bit secretive about it right now. But what we're about to announce to the market is human intelligence with artificial intelligence, saying hi to AI, right? HI and AI, and what the capability of augmentation is that we can introduce to the individual with AI. The opportunity is out there. It's just the application, the education, and the camaraderie that's needed
Well,
to have the adoption to make it happen.
agreed, agreed. And just, I mean, there's so many, you can take so many different approaches on this. But one of the also elements of the article I thought was interesting was Jen talked to the types of leaders that are having more productive organizations, more engaged organizations tend to be where the leaders are empathetic and engaged themselves, not
Yeah.
distant, not limiting their conversations to, town halls, or even worst case, virtual town halls with no open questions. Everything's predetermined because everybody wants to make sure they look good, blah, blah, blah. Again, I think we've run a little bit long today, but again, really important conversation. I think people need to be aware of this, not again in a bad way. I think, but this is where supervisors and managers and executives really need to be stepping back and going, what am I trying to do here? What do I need to do that? I mean, if you want to save, you want to be an efficient organization, it's not about replacing humans with AI. It's about increasing your employee engagement so that, imagine the cost effectiveness. Just to look at the spreadsheet type of conversation. If suddenly my true engagement was 70 or 80%, that people were coming to, doing work because they were excited about it, they were interested in it, that they liked working with the customers to deliver the whatever services you're doing. Whoa, right? Versus the people doing the bare minimum to get by. And we've all been there. Those of us, whether you travel or go to restaurants or whatever, when you're in a place where the employees act like they care and even seem to care and make you feel like they care about you, it's an OMG experience. And I challenge anybody to say that there's going to be AI tools out there that are going to deliver on that same experience. I can't see it. I mean, just envision the role of a nurse, right? Sure, you could have an AI tool come in and take your vitals, blah, 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 what's your blood pressure, your respiratory rate, et cetera. But how does that connect with the nurse making you feel that you're in a safe place at probably one of the scariest days of your life when you're in a hospital bed? Hmm.
Yeah.
And we're far from that. And yet, those are the people that people aren't taking care of. I mean, I can't even imagine what engagement rate is for nurses, but it's pretty low. And we see this in the burnout rates, the resignations, and the freaking strikes, that labor strikes that are going on, where the nurses are feeling completely overwhelmed. So yes, AI could play a role, but it's not going to be replacing nurses. It's going to be enabling nurses and other healthcare professionals to be healthcare professionals, not data entry people.
And
Anyway,
for teachers, with
yeah,
educators and
oh my God.
you can look at any societal foundation and say there's so much better we could be
Right.
doing than what's going on right now. And again, that's where I think some of the creative hacking, right, as Jake kind of calls it in the article, or gamifying, I think rather, that exposes the faulty point that needs to be recognized and looked at
Yep.
and said, okay, well, how do we resolve that? How do we work together and figure it out? How can we include
Well,
AI to help that out?
agreed. Agreed. So I think we need to close it out. But again, thank you, sir, for I think the article's a really interesting one and always good for the conversation. And let's just keep banging away at this. And for our friends that come and join us every day, please subscribe. And if you want to know more about what we're actually doing on the product side and the services side to address these problems, please hit us up at our SDSS.global website. Always want to talk to you. We'd love to get your comments and how we can make this a better and more valuable podcast to you. Thank you all.
Yep. And remember, him and Andreas saying, stop doing stupid stuff.